Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit series video from the subreddit HFY called Retreat Hell, Episode 3, written by a Lithy Dragon. Bryn looked up when she heard the thundering whirl of the viper cobras that had been flying overhead. Coming in low with the roar of a heavy gust of wind was a fatter contraption, this one with wide open bay in the middle. Less than a tail off the ground, it spun sideways to present an open door before setting down with a slight bump. A marine jumped out and started directing all the other marines as they helped the wounded onto the craft. The machine was terribly loud and threw a constant wind. Those close, Bryn realized that the wind was generated by the set of great blades that spun so fast that they were a blur. He stayed right next to Bradford. When the last of their wounded and dead were loaded on, the surviving squad members stepped back and the marine who rode with the medivac and hopped back in. With a roar and a fresh gust of wind, the contraption lifted off, swung around, and then thundered off into the distance. Bradford continued to watch it go as the tall, ebony-skinned human walked over. "You gonna make it, Doc?" "He lost a lot of blood, but I think so, Jabs. Thanks to you." She glances at him, and Bryn was impressed at how much her expression could communicate without ears. "His femoral artery was shredded," the doctor continued. "If you hadn't put the tourniquet on as quickly as you had, he might not have made it. Yeah, but he'll still need a prosthetic. Maybe. I've seen worse amputations get reattached. We're also maybe 20 minutes flight from 3 major trauma centers in the downtown San Diego. His left leg will probably be a bit shorter for the rest of his life, but they have good chance of saving it." "Thanks, Doc," Bradford said as he gave her shoulder a reassuring pat and continued on. Bryn flicked his ears in amazed disbelief. He had seen many similar wounds, and they were often fatal. Even if the soldier survived, he would often succumb to infection. They talk as if infection were not even a concern. How can they reattach a limb that has been completely torn off? Bradford gave one final nod in the direction of the disappearing medevac, and then turned to the rest of her squad. "All right, Marines, let's get up the hill with the rest of the battalion. Dubois, Stevens, take point. 2-5. Retreat hell. Move out." The Marines headed up the hill and into the loose formation, weapons up. Bryn stuck to Bradford's side, his own staff held in his ready. As they moved into the kill zone, Bryn's staff slowly dropped his tail at his side. Where half a cohort of owls had just stood moments before was now a gruesome hellscape. The ground was pockmarked with hundreds of little craters. What was left of the owls was scattered in pieces across them, and the grass was thick with blood of offal. Torsos were exploded, even plate armor was rent clean through, and front and back. The destruction was both awesome and terrifying. I wish we had those firepower years ago, and I hope that we never had to face it. They found no survivors. Halfway up the hill, the owls resumed their artillery fire. Orders were shouted, and the carriages and the tanks pulled behind the peak of the rise. Marines broke out in trench tools and began digging. As Bradford and her squad jogged up to the top of the hill, Bryn marveled at the ability to set such a pace while carrying so much weight. Bradford had nearly squished him when she covered him for her own body. At first, he had been offended by the effort to shield him, but the walk past the obliterated ambush made it quite clear that his armor was no match for the human's weapons. "Nice of your squad to join us, Corporal." Bryn turned to find a Marine approaching them who exuded authority. "Oh crap, it's the new XO," he heard someone mutter. "Sorry about that, ma'am. We ran into a flat tire." Spotting this new Marine, Gomez snapped to attention and started bringing the right arm up, but before he could get halfway up, Kowalski grabbed his wrist and yanked it down. "Are we trying to get the Major frickin' killed? No saluting in the goddamn combat zone, you frickin' jackwagon." He threw Gomez's wrist down in disgust, while the young Marine's skin turned pale. "Now go get me more ammo. Lucy's hungry, and double the load you carry, you goddamn frickin' boot." Bryn suddenly found himself glad that he had also just started to bow to his major, who was obviously a noble of some sort, but apparently also a woman. He still was reading from the woman going to war and now commanding armies, but decided that it was wiser to ignore that for now. The major ignored the dressing down as if it hadn't even happened. That's one hell of an understatement, Corporal. You called for that airstrike. Yes, ma'am, I did. Outstanding job. And damn, quite quick thinking. If you hadn't spotted the ambush and called in the hogs, we would be in a world of hurt right now. Thank you, ma'am, but most of the credit goes to the second artificer here. He gestured at Rin. As the second artificer, HIAT, this is Major Winters of Battalion XO. Winters gave him a nod, and he shrugged to keep his tail from curling in discomfort. HIAT is one who realized that the elves had stopped firing their big guns, and it was his magic that neutralized whatever invisibility spell they had going. He also put up some kind of shield to protect the squad while we called the airstrike. If not for him, we'd all be dead. Kowalski apparently felt the need to chime in. Look what followed us home, Mom. Can we keep him? Winters ignored Kowalski again. Then it sounds like the whole damn battalion owes you their lives, second artificer. Damn fine work. Rin flicked his ears down, shuffling awkwardly, and he kept his eyes low, unsure of how to respond to this kind of attention. He was also able to give us some intel to the artillery, ma'am. Bradford continued. The maximum range is about 700 meters, max effect is about 500, and they can't move fast while they're putting up the shield. That matches what we've seen, Winters nodded. Rate of fire is uncertain, but they've got some kind of mage type on them. He channels power and some combination of other mages, mana crystals, or prisoners, ma'am. They use them like living batteries, Bradford scowled. Jesus, they're just kicking the dog left and right, aren't they? Winters asked. Say that again, ma'am? Bradford asked. Literary reference, she said, waving her hand at the dismissal. Bradford seemed to understand, but Rin found the explanation to be insufficient. Noted on the Rangers. She paused, looking at Rin up and down, his tail wiggling awkwardly. Second artificer, you're the only Kishman who has advanced with us up to the hill. Some of your buddies rallied with us when we joined the fight, but none of them advanced with us. That makes you the senior-most member of the Ganlan army present. Until your commanders see fit to provide me with an official replacement, you are now my local advisor. Rin's ears and tail popped up straight, and he had to adjust his Mickey Mouse to keep up from falling off. What? Bradford, you're the liaison, and the rest of the squad is his escort. He's the only source of intel I have right now, and the only way that we have of spotting those bastards if they try pull the damned invisibility trick again. I don't want him tripping under a tank tread or walking into a magic ray gun blast. Aye, aye, ma'am. Walk with me, she said, and turned away. Rin and Bradford exchanged a glance. Bradford shrugged at him, and they quickly followed. We don't have the numbers nor the meaty capability to push into the main Alban force. We've got 2-5, maybe a company's worth of tag-alongs that we've picked up along the way, and 2 armor platoons. We've got reinforcements on the way, but if they swarm us, we're done. There's tens of thousands of them down there. Over 40,000, Your Grace, Rin confirmed. The elves crossed the river with 8 full legions. No need to Your Grace me, second artificer, Winters laughed. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn. Major or ma'am is fine. Yes, ma'am, Rin replied. These humans are so confusing. Anyway, the big shield that they've got is holding us up, what we've been able to throw at it so far. They reached the crest of the hill, crouching low, and Winters peeked over the edge to observe the point of the enemy forces. Those shields don't move fast, though. Anything that wants to come at us quick has to come out of that shield, where we can light them the frick up. Otherwise, they're struck crawling towards us at a snail's pace. She turned back to Bradford and Rin. The plan is to hold here on this hill. It's not much, but it is a high ground. We dig in, get the hull down, and force them all to turtle up under the shield, and come at us nice and slow. That's exactly what they all do, Rin said, shouting over the sound of godhammers and other heavy weapons. Any time we are able to mass artillery them, they form under a shield and make their dread march towards us. Excellent! That's exactly what we want of them. She gestured towards the conspicuously empty skies. A heavy shard burst struck close, and they ducked a dirt rain down upon them. Air support is bingo on munitions, but more is on its way. 11th Marines managed to get 2 battalions of M777s on their High Mars battalion trucked through the portal and are nearly set up at FOB Tolkien, and the Air Force has a flight of B-1s from the 9th Bomber Squadron en route from Dyers. She pointed back at the rallying Elven legions. Once the arties are set up, they're going to rain unholy hell down upon these bastards, and if that's not enough to crack their shield and lay them flat, the flyboys will carpet bomb the ever-living crap out of them. As if on cue, the familiar whirling thunder of the Viper Cobras roared overhead. Spitting smoke and fire, explosions and impacts rippled across the Elven shields, but they held, unperturbed. 4 of the Viper Cobras circled around the elves while another pair of hogs trumpeted their destructive battle cry, pouring a staccato of death into the shields. Another small shard thumped into the ground ahead of them, obscuring their vision with a tower of dirt and cloud. "Let's step back from the ridge," Winters shouted as one of the tanks rolled up and thumped its godhammer before rolling back towards the hill crest. "It's a little quieter." Another godhammer thumped, spitting fire at the Elven legions. "Aye, ma'am," Bradford agreed. As they were turning to leave, Rin saw the spell shard pulse into the sky and slam into the tail of a Viper Cobra. The explosion obliterated the tail, shattering the big spinning blades and heaving the shard-riddled main body through the air. What remained of it immediately started spinning and thumping against the ground. The broken wreck slammed into the ground and exploded in a great fireball. "Crap!" Winters cursed, sprinting back to the carriage. "Mayors, to all units, we have a bird down. The elves have anti-air capabilities. Heavy artillery at maximum range and 700 meters. All aircraft maintain a minimum standoff range of 900 meters. "How far away is the FOB Tolkien?" Ren asked Bradford, as if they followed Winters at a slower pace. "And how long will it take your artillery to get here?" "About 12 kilometers, Bradford replied. When Ren gave her a confused look, and she added, 12,000 meters, or about 12,000 taels, and they're not coming here. They're setting up at FOB Tolkien." Ren did the math in his head. "That's 6 royal miles." He looked at her, nonplussed. "What good is all your artillery going to be at 6 miles away?" He stopped as his brain caught up to the implications. "You have artillery that can reach 6 royal miles away?" Kowalski laughed. "You bet your ass we do. That's well inside the engagement range. Hell, we've got some weapons that can launch at one side of the planet and hit things on the other side of the planet." Bradford frowned. "Let's hope we don't have to use those. That means crap will have really hit the fan." "But we gotta nuke 'em out of orbit, Jabs," Kowalski insisted. "It's the only way to be sure." "You are saying words that make no sense." Rin flicked his tail and ears in exasperation, and had to readjust his Mickey Mouses to keep them from falling off. Wait, I got one," Edison said. "This place has a moon, right?" Rin cocked his head at them. "Yes." "What kind of crazy question is that?" "Awesome, so does ours," Edison grinned. "We've been to ours." "Now you're just yanking my tail." "Not one bit. We sent people and back several times." Rin gave the man a skeptical glance, readjusting his Mickey Mouses again as they shifted with the movement of his ears. He finally managed to snag the connecting band with his horns on the way that felt much more secure. Further conversation was interrupted by a sound of concentrated barrage of small spellfire pattering on the hill, followed by the Marine shouting, "Corpsman!" Rin jumped as another godhammer thumped further down the line, followed by a steady hammering of whatever the light-wheeled tank things were. 2 Marines carrying a stretcher ran up to the hill. They returned a moment later, at a slower pace. The Marine on the stretcher had the most of his face carved in by the shard blast. "Looks like they're learning," W.R.E. said as another messed-up barrage struck the dirt and flashed overhead, this time concentrated on another point of the Marine's line. "Yeah, they still can't hit for crap at this range, though," Bradford pointed out. "They're just massing fire and hoping to get lucky." She turned to Rin. "What's their effective range?" I've seen them hitting individual targets effectively outside 150 tails, though they can volley fire against formations out to 500 to 600. They all use the same base spell structure, regardless of size, and it collapses at about 700 tails. Did you get all of that, ma'am? Bradford asked. Rin turned around to find Winters standing behind him. It took a lot of willpower to stamp down on his instinct to bow. I did, Corporal, she said, and they all flinched as a concentrated barrage of heavy shardbursts struck the ground in front of their aprons. Several flew harmlessly overhead, but over 24 still impacted the hill, carving out great craters of earth. The Godhammer thumbed back in defiance. Looks like they've finally decided to use the long-range earth movers of theirs to try and dig away our cover, Winters noted. Been wondering when they were going to get around to trying that. She smiled. Good thing the arties are set up. Follow me. About frickin' time, bruh, Stefan said. But the frick took them so long. No GPS, no satellite surveillance, not even a goddamn map. Artie's got to do this the old-fashioned way. This time, Rin and Bradford fell in behind Major Winters without hesitation, and she led them back to the ridge. There they joined 2 other Marines, with some boxy equipment that contained some form of artifice. All set, Sergeant. The map's blank, but we got a grid set up, ready to ranging shots, ma'am. You may commence when ready. Aye, ma'am. He picked up a device and held it to the side of his face. Doghouse 1, this is Fireback 6. Adjust fire. Grid 632018. Over. Sergeant listened in the device. Doghouse 1, this is Firebreak 6. Missed enemy forces under heavy cover. Danger close. Over. He passed on again. Romeo Foxtrot 8E in effect. 1 round out. Another pause. Shot out. He lowered the device from his face. First shells on the way. Rin waited for several seconds for something to happen, but he saw nothing new. He was about to ask if they actually fired when the sergeant called, 5 seconds. He looked, but saw nothing. Overshoot, called one of the spotters, and Rin looked again where the spotter was pointing, and saw the puff of smoke and the dirt rising in the distance, on the other side of the river that the elves were backing up against. Copy, Doghouse 1, this is Firebreak 6, adjust fire, direction 2500, drop 1000, level 150, danger close, out. Several seconds later, Rin heard the faint whistling sound overhead, and a spray of dirt and smoke was kicked into the air off the left of the elven formations. A second later, he heard the explosion. It had a much sharper crack than any artillery that he'd heard. The elves responded with another concentrated barrage. The ground beneath them shuddered as the heavy shardburst dug another crater out of the hill, raining dirt and rocks around the Marines. Fricking pop, these guys are ready, Rin heard somebody shout. He heard the Marines who was talking to his box call out more numbers and marveled at the communication tool. The mana required to power the artifice like that should be utterly impractical, he thought, but if we had artillery that could reach that far, it might be worthwhile. Another shrieking whistle, and this one was much louder, and an explosion tossed dirt into the air almost directly in front of them, less than 200 tails away. Jesus, whose fricking side are they on? Kowalski asked. A little close on that one, Sergeant, Winters commented. Yes, ma'am, Sergeant replied, ignoring Kowalski, and spoke into the device. Doghouse 1, this is Firebreak 6, adjust fire, direction 2500, add 500, and danger close, out. Another quarter of a minute later, something slammed into the elf's shield. The sergeant turned to Winters. We're sighted, ma'am. Very well, Sergeant. Saturation fire. Ah, frick yeah, make it rain. Aye, ma'am. Doghouse 1, this is Firebreak 6, saturation fire from grid 638011 to grid 362018. Mash troops under cover, danger close, fire for effect. He paused. All batteries ACI in effect. 360 rounds DPICM in effect. 60 rounds out. Rin waited for another half a minute, and then a whistle trailed overhead, ending in an explosion on the elven shield. Then another, and another, and another. Whistles shrieked constantly overhead, and ripples of explosions began walking across the elven shield, faster than he could count. Interspersed with the barrage was that already deafening roar were heavy explosions that thumped in his chest even this far away. By all the gods above and below, never before had he seen so much destruction brought to bear. The shield started to waver. Kowalski cried. 155 mics of mother-fricking freedom delivered at muzzle velocity. Ma'am, launch of flight inbound, ETA 30 seconds. Winter's response was drowned out by another godhammer thumping anger in the elven legions. Rin felt a tap on his shoulder and turned to see Bradford pointing at the sky. 6 large bird-shaped things were moving through the sky, but they were much too large and moving much too fast to be birds. The first 2 banked on motionless wings and flew over the elven legions, spilling dozens of objects as they flew. The objects fell slow enough for Rin to see them, and when they finally struck the shield, a wave of explosions and fires rolled across the shield. The shield shattered, roiled, and shattered as the next 2 craft topped their loads overhead. A fresh wave of smoke and fire engulfed the elven legions, throwing debris high in every direction. Rin was certain that most of that was pieces of bodies. Hoo-hoo! Look at the flyboys, actually worth something. Bend over, Alfies, we're going in dry. Artillery shells no longer impacted the shield, slammed into the elven ranks. Whole formations were wiped out. 3 more heavy explosions burst over the elves as the last pair flew overhead. The shields are down, lay it on, Winters called, waving the Marines up. At her signal, all the vehicles all surged to the top of the hill and fired. Stunned by the intensity of the barrage, it took Rin a moment to realize that the number of tanks had doubled since the last time he had counted, and there were more of the lighter carriages and Marines. Kowalski whooped and opened fire with his saw while the rest of the Marines surged to the top of the hill, dropped down whatever they could find room, and fired. Thunder, fire, and glowing trails of light poured from the Marines' line. The elven ranks were completely engulfed in smoke, dust, and fire. Hey, some of them are getting away, Edison reported, pointing at several groups of elves that were sprinting across the river. What the frick? Are they walking on water? What kind of Jesus bullcrap are they pulling? Ceasefire! 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 Winters called out, barely heard over the din. The cannonade slowly tapered off to nothing, followed by the last few artillery shots shrieking across the sky to explode somewhere in the column of smoke that used to be the 8 legions' grand army of elves. Ma'am, the flyboys have eyes on the forces that made it across the river. They're pretty scattered, and it is hard to say for sure, but it looks like maybe a quarter of the original forces made it across, along with a couple of the magic towers. The sergeant paused. Ma'am, orders from Fob Tolkien. We are to sweep and clear the river, but not to proceed beyond. Flyboys are to enforce the river as a boundary. Send Wilco, Winters said, and started passing orders through the sergeant. Rin looked at the column of smoke and dust towering above them. He did not want to go down there, but looking at the Marines all around him, he didn't see that he had much of a choice. All right, Marines, sweep and clear the river. Form up by squads and move as a line with the vehicles. 2-5. Retreat, hell. Rin trudged his way through the Marine camp, trying to stay out of the way of the bustle of activity. Night had fallen, and many of the Marines had found some place to sleep, but more humans were arriving all the time. The last several hours had been a battle had passed in a blur. They had walked down to the river, searching for threats and survivors. They found none. Rin shuddered, remembering the carnage and destruction that he had walked through. I didn't even look like the gala, he thought. It looked like another world. That notion brought him no comfort. Once the battle was over, the Lord Generals had been swift to relieve him of the job of Major Winter's advisor. Lord General Yangri himself had commended him for his bravery, and then quickly sent him back to the lower ranks. Returning to the camp to try and find anyone from his column or line, Ryn instead found himself snatched up by several different working parties. He spent several hours working to salvage the Granland camp and assist the humans in setting up theirs. "They're turning this place into a fortress with earthworks," Ryn noted as he passed another mechanical wonder, growling and rumbling as it filled great bags with earth and rocks scooped up from the ground. "At any rate, they'll have it done literally overnight." He stopped to ask for directions. The Marine pointed towards a collection of tents and pavilions half away across the growing compound. "At least I was able to retrieve my own staff from the armory." He double-checked the leather strap that looped around the staff that he clung to his shoulder. The lower buckle was worn and was prone to coming undone, and an extra mana crystal. His stomach rumbled. He had grown used to the sort of rations the last couple years of the war, but food was particularly scarce in the royal host camp tonight. Many of the soldiers who had routed had raided the food stalls as they fled. Not that the lords of the host would go hungry. Their food stockpiles were kept under heavier guard. Walking past the mound of dirt that strange spikes and fans and metal spires circling around it, Ryn took stock of what he had left. One staff, half expended, one replacement mana crystal. He touched his gambeson, and one set of armor, mostly intact, shirt and trousers, undersized boots. He grimaced. "Well, they're a closer fit than the ones I was originally issued, at least." He patted his belt, one dagger, mostly empty coin purse, and one pair of Mickey Mouses. He sighed. "And apparently I'm all that's left of the third line. That does make me the line commander," he chuckled at the absurdity. Ryn absently patted his gambeson, checking for another pouch, and his ears drooped as he was reminded that he left it in a crate that he used as personal chest before the battle. And that was all there was left of the column pavilion was a few scraps of muddy canvas, a broken cot, and a few shattered chests. Head down and tail but dragging on the dirt, Ryn continued his slowly trudge, his thoughts drifting down dark paths. "Shields!" Ryn poked his ears, looking up. "Shields, where the frick have you been?" Kowalski waved at him. "Get your furry rear over here." Ryn turned towards the tall Marine, his spring lifting. "I found him. Man, we've been looking for you all over," Kowalski said, meeting him halfway. He threw a heavy arm over Ryn's shoulder and casually started dragging him towards the salvaged Royal Host Pavilion. He carried a large box under the other arm. Shouldering the door flap aside, he pulled Ryn in after him. "Hey guys, look who I found skulking around our front porch." "Oh crap, it's Shields!" Gomez hopped up off the cot he had been sitting on. "Shields, man, where have you been? We were worried." Dubois waved him over from another cot, where he had his weapon apart in pieces with a rag, a brush, and something that smelled like oil. Ryn gripped both of his ears, swinging forward. It was the first time he'd seen any of them without a helmet on. "Your ears are round." "Of course not. Did you think that we were some knife-eared Alfie bastards?" Samson asked. "Nah, we're aliens, brah," Stevens said. "Aliens from another world, man." "Shut the frick up, Stevens," Kowalski said as he set the box down on the crate that was being used as a table. "I'm not a goddamn alien. Everything else is a goddamn alien." "What's in the box, Kowalski?" Miller asked. "What's in the box?" Samson echoed. "Chow time," Kowalski declared as he ripped the top open and started passing out 10 packages. "Oh man, where the frick did you get these? I thought that they were still sorting out some chow through the portal," Bradford asked, setting aside her own weapon to reach the package. "Co-guns managed to rustle some up. I snagged a box for the squad before the rest of the company scarfed them down." "Awesome, but where did the co-guns get them?" Dubois asked. First Sergeant asked him the same question. "Yeah, what did he say?" "Don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to." Kowalski tossed the package at Ryn and gestured for an empty cot next to Bradford. "Have a seat, Shields, and dig in." Ryn slowly sat down on the cot and looked at the package in confusion. "Here, let me help." Bradford laughed. She told him how to tear it open and explained what the contents were and what to do with them as he pulled them out. "Looks like you lucked out. The beef ravioli is pretty decent." Ryn wasn't sure whether he should be confused, amazed, or horrified at what these humans had managed to do to make the lasting real rations. Oh, frack yes. Tortellini. Chili mac. Hey, there's another beef ravioli in there. Toss me one. Hey, is there a veggie burger in there? Samson asked. Yes, I got your fricking veggie burger, you sick frick, Kowalski said, chucking him a package. How the frick can you stand those? Man, I just like them, okay? Whatever, more chili mac for me. Hey, real talk though, Dubois said, disassembling his package. What are we going to call the Earls? What do you mean? Well, the terrorists are Terry, and we called the Russians Ivan. The communists in Vietnam were Charlie. The Germans were Jerry's. What can we call the elves? It's got to be an E name, right? Samson said. Maybe. The Russians didn't fit that rule. What about Eli? Gomez asked. Shut the frick up, Boot, Kowalski snapped. You don't get to pick names. What about Eduardo? Stevens asked. You don't get to pick names either. Just call them Keeblers, Bradford said, while showing Rin how to use the chemical heating pack in his emery. What magic is this? Everyone looked at her for a moment, and that's why Jabs is in charge, Kowalski said, and they all turned back to the meal. Hey, Edison, you gonna come eat? Gomez asked. Yeah, in a minute, he said, not looking up from the device he was inspecting. What you working on? The young Marine asked. The GoPro. It took some shrapnel and the Humvee got hit. What? The bastard's got a GoPro? Samson asked. Yeah, the screen's busted, and so are the lights. But it turns on, I think, but I can't tell. They got the GoPro? Muller asked. Oh, we're gonna freak them up. What's so special about a GoPro? Gomez asked. That thing looks ancient. Listen here, you goddamn boot. Kowalski rounded on Gomez. That GoPro has more combat time than you have been in the service. It's been passed down through 8 generations of Marines, been on 12 deployments, survived 3 grenades, saved 4 Marines, and recorded half the freaking combat footage on YouTube. You will show it some goddamn respect. Do you understand me, Private? Yes, Lance Corporal. Can you fix it? Bradford asked. Maybe. I don't know, Jabs. Edison shook his head. The memory looks intact, so it shouldn't be able to pull the footage off, at least, but I don't think the GoPro's fought its last fight. He fiddled with the buttons a little more, then reverently set the device down on the crate. Rip, GoPro, we'll bury it with full honors. I have so many questions that my questions have questions, Ren thought, as he carefully opened up the entree package, but above and below the smell's good. He used the spoon to scoop out the steaming bite and cautiously put it in his mouth. His eyes went wide and his ears perked up straight. This is amazing. It actually tastes like something. He scarfed it down with the rest as fast as he could and demolished the packaging so that he could lick the inside clean. I guess our kitty was hungry, Kowalski laughed. He's not a cat, he's a fox, Samson said. Look at the nose. Are you kidding? Look at him. He's a cat. Put him in a box and take a picture, and he'd fit every gadget has wears meme ever made. Pointy nose. But what about the horns? Dubois asked around a mouthful of food. Is he part goat? I'll part goat a spell blast up your rear, Rin snarled as he worked at tearing open another package with his teeth. Whatever in the 5 howls a goat was, I'm sitting right here. Hey, he's learning, Kowalski said, throwing his arms wide. There's hope for him yet. You're all goddamned insane. Well, duh, we're Marines. What do? Sit around all day eating glue? Yep. Though we do prefer crayons, Edison said, eating his emery cold. Nothing better than munching on a good crayon, Kowalski added. What's your favorite flavor, Jabs? Mine's purple. Mine's green. Me too, Samson chimed in. I like the blue ones, Dubois added. I don't like the blue ones, Miller shook his head. They're too tart. Rin just stared at them. We've been saved by chaos demons. I think you guys broke him, Bradford laughed. We broke him, Kowalski feigned insult. You're the one that was dragging and shoving and dropping him all over the battlefield. You're not even a day into the relationship, and you're already abusing him. Shut the frick up, Kowalski. What did you guys break up already? Kowalski shrugged. Maybe we can start seeing each other again. Samson and I broke up because I don't like power bottoms. Samson laughed. You're the one who keeps trying to win gay chicken with a guy who's actually gay, and then gets all butthurt when you lose. I'm not butthurt. You're freaking butthurt. Rin decided it was best to ignore the humans. He pulled his legs up onto the cot and hunched over the latest package that he had just opened. It was dense, brown square that smelled delicious. The humans continued their banter, with Kowalski driving the greatest heights of sexual overtones. Rin ignored them, lost in the sweet gooiness of the brown square, until Kowalski shouted for his attention. Hey, shields! Isn't there supposed to be camp followers? Rin tilted his head to twisted his ear in confusion. You know, civvies who follow the army around, especially the war types. Kowalski, we're not having this conversation, Bradford cut in. The last time we need to do right now is a string of Okinawa incidents. But Jabs, you're still hung up on your boyfriend, and Samson and I are too busy fighting over the kids in a divorce. Where else am I going to get some tail? Kowalski, if you really want to blow some steam, go see if any army units have shown up that you can relocate your gear from. Jabs, you're freaking brilliant. This is why you're in charge. Come on, guys, let's go. I think I saw some army trucks rolling in on the other side of the camp. Kowalski jumped up, grabbing some of his gear, dragging most of the squad along with him through sheer enthusiasm. W.R.E. exchanged a glance with Bradford as he finished putting his weapon back together. She sighed. Go with them and make sure that they don't get too much trouble. Aye, aye, Jabs, he said, setting his weapon down and grabbing some gear. Kowalski made the rest of the squad wait outside of the W.R.E. had to join them. As the corporal stepped through the door flap, Gomez spun around. Oh crap, I forgot. Kowalski grabbed him by the collar, ranked him back, and shoved him into the walkway from the tent. You're doing without boot. Jabs and Shields are getting their alone time. What? Edison asked as the posse walked away from the tent. Look, Jabs isn't the frickin' forget type, right? Kowalski explained. She's the type who wants something more serious than that. But she's too straight-laced to frick anyone in the division, and she's too career-driven to have enough time to find that outside of the corpse. He shrugged. Besides, did you see them? They're a perfect match. What, are you playing matchmaker now, Kowalski? W.R.E. asked. Hey, they don't call me Matt the Mad Dog Matchmaker for nothing. Nobody calls you that, Miller laughed. They will, Kowalski insisted. Now come on, I'm pretty sure they were setting up patriots over this way. Rin stared through the door flap as Kowalski, in the silence that descended now that he and Bradford were alone. Why do you tolerate him and his insubordination? Bradford laughed. Kowalski is a complete balls-to-the-wall motard, motivated retard. She added when Rin looked at her in confusion. He's committed to the corps and a damn good Marine, and he is also 100% motivated and dedicated to causing somebody trouble. With a capital T, she shrugged. If you can point him in the right direction, he'll cause all sorts of trouble. We'll drive everyone's motivation along with him. Letting him give me an extra dose of the same banter and bullcrap that he gives everyone else makes him think that he's causing me trouble. Gives him an outlet, and he works harder at doing everything else that I need him to do. She sighed heavily. Besides, it's mostly a defense mechanism. She shrugged at Rin's confused flip of his ears. He was always something of a frickhead, from what I've been told, but he earned 2 Bronze Stars in Afghanistan. The first was before I reported to the battalion, and he lost half of his squad in that fight. She shook her head. He never recovered. It still eats away at him, so he puts on the show, acts more of a motard jerk than he was, to cover for it. Rin nodded, thinking of the friends and comrades that he'd lost over the years. He didn't know how many of his pike line were still alive, or if they even still existed. He saw the Kak's lacerated corpse, remembering the sight of the vivid smell of his friend's insides that should never have been seen in the light of day. The faint sizzle as the gem blade casually dragged the blade through the friend's body. The smell of the burning hair and the scorching flesh. Ah, crap, man, I'm sorry. Rin snapped out of the memory at the light touch on the shoulder. He was surprised to see a look of concern on the human's face. So different, but recognizable. She withdrew her hand. I didn't mean to bring up that. She rolled her hand in the air and struggled for words. Recent memories. It's okay, he said, flicking his ears back in an uncomfortable dismissal. It's not the first defeat that I've, participated in, he grimaced, remembering other friends lost, and more, nor the worst. Another touch brought him to the present. This time it was a hand on top of his. These humans are so, tactile. You can talk to me about it if you need to. She rolled her shoulders and shrugged. I don't know if it worked the same for your Keshmen, but for humans at least, talking about it usually helps. Ren began, but faltered. These things weren't talked about. To talk about the loss was to accept it. To remember defeat was to relive it. To make what was lost a reality. He felt a weight press on him. His face, his limbs, some invisible force that wanted to crush him into the ground. He whined. He tried to move, but he was paralyzed by the crushing weight. I couldn't. His breath caught in his seizing lungs. He started to canvass the pavilion's wall, but didn't see it. He saw the smoke over the trees, the smouldering ruins. He retched at the stench of burning fur and fresh mixed with blood and offal. My home is gone, he whispered, and keened at the admission. Radford remained silent, letting him continue on his own. We'd won. We'd beaten them back, made them into a retreat. It was a desperate maneuver and a hard fight, but the royal host had shown its strength and forced them to withdraw. He shook his head, the movement slow and stuttering, but we were too late. I grew up in a town of Lynae in the Yuntar province. It was in change of subject, but it was important and less painful. It was always something of a backwater, a minor trade stop, surrounded by farms and a lumber mill. My family are only yeomen, but my father always saved some extra coin to have me educated, and when I showed the talent for artificing, the kingdom paid for an additional instruction. We knew the war with the elves was coming. They had broken centuries of isolation and were expanding aggressively. He was rambling now, he knew it, but found that he couldn't stop, and he didn't care. My father passed away the year that the war was declared. He contracted tallow fever. The town physician did what he could, but there was only so much even the best medical artificers could do. Ren took a breath, remembering his father's laugh, a stern scolding, his dedication to his craft. A wagon wheel is a wagon wheel, but no matter what you do, always do it well. This pain hurt, but it was old, and it had given him purpose. With father gone, we would have struggled to get by, but the war was on. The elves had declared us animals vermin to be exterminated, and the host was the desperate need of artificers. He nodded, his spine straightening. They guaranteed an allowance that would keep my family fed, and so I signed up to support my family and defend my home. He looked at Bradford and was startled at how interesting her eyes seemed to be listening. They're green, blue, grey, orange and brown, yes, but never have I seen green eyes before. She nodded at him to continue, and he did. I became an artificer in the royal host. I trained as a pikeman first. Every member of the host is a pikeman. She exhaled a short laugh through her nose. Every marine is a rifleman, she said with a smile. A similar doctrine, he said, and surprised himself returning the smile. That's when I met Keck. We had reported to the same time. We quickly became friends, and we managed to stay together in the same line for a whole war. He paused as memories of the day slammed into him, and he barely croaked out. Until today. Radford placed her hand on his again. The sensation of her smooth skin was against his fur was bizarre, and an unexpected comfort. He found strength to continue. I was given a staff and trained as an artificer of war. I've never been the greatest artificer in the kingdom, but I'm still a damn good one. I'm decent enough with elemental pulses and focused mana bursts. I even managed to pick up a bit of elven shard spelling, but I have a particular knack for defensive artificers. He twisted his free hand through the air, and it moulding a shape of what he saw in his mind. I can intuit shield geometries better than most, and I can do it while holding enchantments artifices active on the half the line, and while maintaining a decent defensive output. He nodded. I made second artificer because I'm good. He sighed. But not good enough. He stared down through the canvas again, his snout twitching with a snarl that wanted to form. Nobody could be good enough. He felt reassuring squeezed in his hand and something moving through his fur. He looked down, and Bradford was rubbing the back of his hand with her thumb. He stared at the motion as it continued. The war had been on for 4 years, and I'd been campaigning for 3. The early battles were inconclusive, both of us probing each other, testing each other. But then the Elven legions showed up in force, and they pushed us back. He took a shuddering breath. We were not so unevenly matched at first, but the Lord Generals have their notions of how battles and wars should be fought, and they did not account for all of what the elves were capable of. He barely noticed Bradford's grimace, his snout twitching into a snarl of his own. We lost more than we should have, still, lost more than we should, because some high lord in his grand estate had been taught since his mother weaned him that battles are fought with particular ways, and nobody dares question it. His expression softened. He was too exhausted to stay angry. Not all of them were so bad. Lord General Kaizen Youngri, the sire of our current Supreme Commander, he understood. He restructured the host, changed how we engaged the elves, and we started pushing them back. A brief flare of light faded from his eyes. Then we got word of new elven offensive. We had just pushed the elves out of what used to be the city of Vashan. They had been there for months, and nothing was left, not even ruins. He shuddered. Every place that we pushed them out of was the same. It was as if they were trying to wipe out all traces of our existence. Rin whined. Yintar was supposed to be different. They had invaded the province. It wouldn't be easy, and it was a risk, but we could save the province, drive them out before they wiped out more of our nation, our history, from existence. He shivered, the heavy weight returning. He looked past the canvas again, and when he continued, he could barely muster more than a monotone. It was 3 days' forced march, but we forced them to the field of farms outside Lele. The whole of the royal host had come to save the little, insignificant backwater Lele. It was a hard fight. We were exhausted from the march, and our baggage train had lagged behind, so we were short in mana crystals, arrows, everything. But the old General Yingri was a clever bastard, and he caught them in a pincer, forced them between 2 rises that prevented them from using their artillery until we were right on top of them, while we rained every single arrow and bolt that we had into them. We pushed them right to the brink of the trees, and when the 3rd pincer sprung into their flank, they had no choice but to break the withdrawal. A ragged breath was all that he could force out through the paralyzing weight, his voice ragged. I saw the smoke above the trees. I knew what it meant. We all did. Despite our exhaustion, we all double-timed the last half a mile. His eyes twitched and the vision blurred. The scent of the scorched fur and the flesh filled his snout. It was all ruins, smouldering rubble and bodies. The house I grew up in was nothing more than a pile of ash. He whimpered, unable to keep his breathing regular. Little Maya had grown so much since I'd left. His voice cracked. Her body was in pieces. Talon, he had found a sword and tried to fight, but it was cut in 2 and his head was gone. He was just a boy, and they cut his head off and crushed it. He keened again, rocking back and forth. I found Mama in the yard. They burned her alive. I only knew there was her because of the wedding bands on her wrist. His whole body shook and he tried to control his breathing. He wiped his hands across his face, his eyes streaming. I never found Tala. Half of the village was missing. No bodies were found. He growled. We knew what had happened to them. They destroyed my home, my family, and I couldn't stop them. His vision blurred, and he could see nothing but the mutilated bodies of his brother and younger sister, smell the blackened flesh of his mother, until a hand on his shoulder brought him back. Only this time, it wasn't just a light touch. Bradford had moved to the cot next to him and was wrapping her arms around him, putting him against her. He resisted at first. It was highly inappropriate and improper, but he just didn't have the energy to care. He gave in, and he clung to her. His body was shuddering as he just let go. Ryn didn't know how long they sat there while he expended his grief. It might have been minutes, it might have been hours. All he knew was that, when it was done, he was exhausted. With a sigh he pulled back, and a calming catharsis settling over him. He wanted to stay that way for longer, with her rubbing his back in comfort, but he found that he had the energy to care about impropriety again. "Thank you," he said. I don't know what to say." His ears flicked awkwardly. "You don't have to say anything," she replied, wiping her own eyes. "I'm a Marine. We're all supposed to be tough as nails, but, war is hell, and I don't know a single one of us that could have gone through that and not broken down at some point. I've seen guys kill themselves over a lot less." "I almost died that day," Ryn admitted. "I didn't care about surviving anymore, and I would have chased after the elves until I found them, and then thrown myself at them until I had killed me. But Keck found me, stopped me, and promised we'd get them back." He heaved a sigh. "And now he's dead, and it's all on me." Bradford shook her head, taking his hand again. "Wrong. You're not alone. You've got us." Her voice took on a hard edge. "They angered a sleeping giant, and they don't have a frickin' clue about the world of hurt that has just dropped on their heads. Today we were just getting started. We're going to make those bastards pay for everything that they've done, full price, in blood, and we're going to make sure that they never do it again, even if we have to nuke them into oblivion. Hoorah!" Ryn snorted and flickered his ears back in a direction. "Hoorah!" "Good." She clapped him on the shoulder. "We'll make a Marine out of you yet." "We'll see," he said, as they shared a little chuckle. "Well," she said, stepping away from him and reaching down to pull off her blouse. She held it away from her body, looking at the garment in mild disgust. "It's been a long freaking day, and I'm beat. I'm going to hit the sack." Ryn sat up straight, his ears and spine going parade deck rigid. He had forced himself to look elsewhere. The proportions were a little different, but with her just undershirt, it was clear that she had the same shape and anatomy as a Kinshan woman. He had denied, ignored, or just tried to put off the question all day, but found himself suddenly unable to ignore it further. "So, you're a woman?" "Ha! You've just now figured this out?" she asked, turning back to look at him. "Yeah, I've got boobs and a vagina. What of it?" She cocked her hips, accentuating the curve of her figure, and glared at him. "You ogling me, fox boy?" Ryn stuttered and stammered, his eyes going wide as he looked at Bradford, and then immediately looked away. He felt his stomach dropping through the trousers in sheer mortification. Bradford struggled to keep a straight face, but her mouth twitched, and then she snorted, and then doubled over in laughter. "I'm just freaking with you, man. Relax." Ryn did no such thing, though he was relieved that he hadn't just gravely insulted her. "Let me guess," she said, sitting down on a cot and grunting as she pulled one of her boots off. "Kishman women don't go to war." Ryn shook his head, pointedly trying not to look at her, though he feared his ears were giving him away. He made a mental note to amputate the mutinous bastards at a later date. "Yeah, we used to be the same way," she said, putting off another boot. "Then we realized it was kind of dumb idea, a waste of half the talent pool of your population." She stowed the second boot underneath her rack, next the first one, and then began pulling off the socks that she wore underneath. "We're still figuring out a lot of the crap, and we've only just started allowing women in combat roles in the last few years, though we've had women in the military for decades." She examined the socks with even more disgust, and hung them up somewhere else to dry out and air out. Rin found himself distracted by her clothing, from the size of her boots to the socks that she wore inside of them. Even her feet were bizarre. "Hey," she said, wriggling her bare toes at him. "My boobs are up here." His eyes immediately snapped up, and then up again, as his ears flicked down, in and out in embarrassment. "Oh man," she said, giggling. "I'm sorry, that wasn't even fair. I'm just poking fun. Please, don't take it seriously." Rin looked at Bradford, his ears twirling front to back and back to face her again, as she tried to figure out how to even feel or respond to the whole situation. "Why am I so flustered? She's not even a Kishman. She doesn't have any fur." "How do you," Rin waved to her and gestured around the pavilion, "live with a bunch of horny, frick-ready Marines in a male-dominated Korea?" "Yeah, that. Not what I was actually trying to ask, but that's fine." "Well," Bradford sighed, "I'd be lying if I said it was easy. It's not, but I get by mostly by not being a pushover. I give right back whatever the kind of crap they give me. Make it clear that I am not interested in them, and as for proprietary," she shrugged, "there comes a point when you're just too tired to give a frick," she laughed. "Besides, half the regiment's seen Kowalski's balls. Seeing each other naked isn't a big deal as people make it out to be." Rin nodded slowly, still struggling to wrap his mind around the whole affair. "A lot of taken for a day, isn't it?" "Yeah," Rin agreed. He paused, looking around. "Can I stay here tonight? The rest of my line, I don't think my line exists anymore. My column pavilion is gone. All I have left is what I'm wearing." "Of course," Bradford said. "We were actually trying to find you earlier. I talked to First Sergeant and the company LT. The high-ups always liked the idea of joint operations, and that shield stuff you did was pretty freaking awesome. Never mind the whole dispelling elves' invisibility bullcrap. The brass is on board with permanently embedding some artificers in our units, and we dibsied you into our squad." Rin had to stop to think for a long moment. If he stayed with the royal host, he would just be folded into another line and sent back to a meat grinder. These humans were alien and crazy, but they talked to such wonders that he'd never seen, and they were winning. That is a lot of crazy that I'd have to deal with, he thought. I hope I won't become just as crazy. "Okay," he said. "I'm in." "Outstanding," Bradford said. "Welcome to the 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines. Retreat hell." "You keep saying that," he said. "What does it mean?" "It's our battalion motto," Bradford said. "It originated back in the First World War, and yes, we had more than one. My country, the United States of America, joined the war late, and when the Marines from 2-5 arrived in the trenches, the French officer told one of our officers that we should retreat. Our officer replied, 'Retreat? Hell, we just gotcha.' Retreat hell has been our motto ever since." "Oh," Rin said. He snorted. "Rather fitting today." "Yeah, I thought about that too," Bradford nodded. "Any more questions?" Rin stared and shook his head in negative, but stopped, his ears twisting in curiosity. "One, actually." "Shoot. Why do they call you Jabs?" "It's my initials," she smiled. "My name is Jamie Alice Bradford, so my initials are J.A.B. She shrugged. "Far from the worst nickname that I could have picked up." "I see," he said, falling into an awkward silence, until he was nearly bowled off of the cot when she chucked her blanket and pillow at him. "Now get some shut-eye. The boys should be back soon, and tomorrow always comes far too early." Rin set the blanket and pillow down on the cot and began doffing his gambeson as the Bradford turned out the lights. Tyrael opened his eyes. The moon had risen high in the sky, but with only a sliver it shed sparse light. Slowly, silently, he eased himself out of the mud and muck. Normally he would have disparaged being covered in such filth, but tonight it would aid his cause. Carefully he crept away from the edges of the field and the harsh, unnatural lights these humans were casting upon it. Slipping into the wood, he turned east. There were trees and a low ridge obstructing his view, but he could feel it. The internium thrummed in his bones. Cautiously, with a painstaking focus on stealth, he made his way to his target. The great tear in the very fabric of the two realities, rent and torn asunder, or permanently fused together. The portal. End of chapter. I hope that you enjoyed, and if you did, please consider subscribing. If you wish to support the author, there is a link to the original story, so pop over there and give him your support. If you wish to support this channel, however, there are a few ways to do so. The best and easiest would be to share this video with other people, as well as liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. All of these things tell the algorithm that this channel is at least vaguely interesting, and that may share it with other people. If you wish to support the channel in some other manner, watching my other videos would also help tremendously. Or, if you really like, there is a link down below to leave a tip, or to join the Patreon. Any and all support is very much appreciated. And I hope that you all have a good one until the next time, and I'll see you then. Cheers.